The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Carl Opedal, and I'm delighted to be here for this webinar, during which we will hopefully talk about things that are of pertinent interest just now, given that EFS Web is not working quite the way it's supposed to. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for signing up on such short notice. A few minutes ago, I got a crabby email from somebody saying, I'm not going to be able to attend this webinar because you didn't tell me far enough in advance when it was going to be. And I wrote back and I said, well, I wish that a couple of weeks ago I could have predicted that the patent office servers were going to go down. And the person wrote back and said, yeah, I guess you can't be expected to predict that. Anyway, so here we are, and we're going to be talking about how to file papers at the USPTO by fax or mail. And many of you may already know about this, and for many of you this may be a review, but the purpose of the webinar is to just sort of review how you know how to do this stuff correctly. One of our attendees asks, have I gotten any sleep the last few days? And the answer is no, and I'm sure many of you can join me in the position of not having gotten very much sleep the last few days dealing with the patent office problems. Okay, so so what do we need to know? Well, there are several things we need to know. First is that in about 24 hours, you will receive a follow-up email, which will include an evaluation questionnaire. Please fill out the evaluation form. And you will also see a link that shows where to download today's slides. And if I'm super lucky, I may be able to successfully record this and make it available as a video that could be watched later. I'm not sure whether that will be successful or not. Feel free. Many of you have attended webinars that I've presented. You know that I'm perfectly comfortable to have questions come in as they come up. And so feel free to ask your questions. Don't feel like you have to save them to the end. The usual disclaimer, watching this webinar or looking at these slides does not make you our firm's client. It does not make me your attorney. If you want legal advice, get it somewhere else. This is not legal advice. And in particular, you must read and understand 37 CFR 1.8, also known as Rule 8. That is the rule that defines what you can and cannot do in terms of fax filing and postal filings with the post office. Do not count this webinar as the authoritative source on how to do these things. Be sure that you read and understand 37 CFR 1.8. It's very important. Okay. I will also mention that we have a live in-person PCT seminar coming up in Redwood City, California, October 16th through 18th, 2.5 days long. It's on the topic of patent cooperation treaty, the most fascinating topic you could possibly attend for 2.5 days. There's a regular price for this seminar. There's a discounted price that's available until August 27th. And finally, if you use this coupon code POP-UP, you could get an extra $100 off. So sign up for this seminar. Send this link to your friends, your colleagues at other firms. It'd be great if the room could be filled up, if we could get a full room of attendees for this seminar. Okay, why are we here? We're here because sometimes EFS Web has been broken. And bizarrely, even sometimes the EFS Web contingency server, the one that's supposed to be working even if the main server is broken, has also been broken. For the last couple days, even the contingency server has been broken, just like the main server. So we all need to know how to respond by fax or mail. We simply have to. It's part of serving our clients well that we need to know how to do these things. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. First, we're going to talk about the post office procedure, and then we will talk about the fax procedure. But first, the post office procedure. Well, you're going to assemble your, it says patent application here. What I really meant to write was your response to office action as printouts on paper. And then you're going to prepare a return postcard, and you're going to prepare a shipping label. You don't absolutely have to do a shipping label. You could use a handwritten address, P.O. Box 1450, and so on. But I think for most of us, what we would prefer is to use a priority mail shipping label, which includes a tracking number. In the package, I would also include, well, you must include Form PTO SB 92 or its equivalent. We will talk about that in a minute. That is the Certificate of Mailing or Certificate of Faxing, Form SB 92. Very important document. In the materials that you will download later in the email that I will send you 23 hours from now, the materials include a copy of Form SB 92, so you can see just what we're talking about here. Then you put it all into an envelope, take it to the post office, and that's what you would do. Or drop it in a mailbox. It doesn't have to go to the post office. As long as you drop it in a mailbox, and as long as you can say and have it be true, you dropped it in the box before midnight, that's good enough. So just find a drop box somewhere. Again, as a reminder, you're going to need to read Rule 8 very carefully. You cannot simply rely on these slides. Okay, it's all fine and good to talk about sending things by fax or sending things by postal service, but it's important to know that there's some things you can't do that way, including the filing of new patent applications or an entry into the U.S. national phase. See, I misspelled the word phase there. That's what a hurry I was in today to prepare these slides. But those things, if you're going to do that at all by some means other than e-filing, you got to do it by express mail. You can't do it by the procedure we're talking about here. Many of you were on the webinar of 1 hour ago where we talked about how to file by express mail. But if you're going to use fax or ordinary first-class mail, ordinary inexpensive postal mail that you just drop into a mailbox, you are not permitted to use that as a way of filing a patent application or an entry into the U.S. national phase. Okay, talking about the details. You need to know where your post office is or your post office drop box. Research it, plan ahead so that you know for sure where it is. Check and make sure it's still there. Some drop boxes have disappeared in recent years. You don't have to go in person to the post office. You could just drop it into a drop box. And of course, planning ahead, you should plan ahead and make sure you know how to prepare a shipping label if you're going to use a click and ship or something. One of our people asks, can the certificate of mailing be at the top of the first page instead of using Form SB 92? Yes. Anything that satisfies Rule 8 will do. And in our office years ago, we had a big rubber stamp, about 2 inches by 3, and the rubber stamp had all the magic words for Certificate of First Class Mail, and we just rubber stamped it on the first page of whatever we were filing, and then you fill in the date and you apply a signature. So anything that contains all the magic words of Rule 8 will work. It does not absolutely have to be Form SB 92. That's true. I recommend using Form SB 92 just because there's no way the patent office can play dumb and pretend you didn't provide the right magic words if you use their official form. Okay. Now, I recommend Tyvek envelopes, non-woven polyolefin fabric for the sticklers among us who don't like to use trademarked terms. In our office, we use a plain white Tyvek envelope. You could use a priority mail envelope from the post office. They're made of Tyvek. You could pick them up ahead of time. There are flat rate envelopes that you can get from the post office, priority mail flat rate envelopes. This has the advantage that you don't have to worry about having the correct amount of postage because it doesn't matter how heavy it is. If it fits, it ships. Having said that, the flat rate envelopes are made of recycled paper, and if they get wet, they fall apart into a bunch of mush. Indeed, if you even put it into a humid room, it will fall apart. But if you are confident that your trip to the post office or to the drop box can be a trip where the package doesn't get wet at all, doesn't even get sprayed by a water sprinkler or something, you could use the flat rate envelopes from the Postal Service. Okay. What else can we say about this? Can I list all of the things being filed? Well, let's talk about that. We'll talk about it in a minute. But what are you filing? Well, it's the same things that you would have filed if you were e-filing. If you're responding to an office action, it's probably some remarks. It's probably a set of claims. It might be amendment to the specification. You're going to want to put this certificate of mailing at the front, Form SB 92 or its equivalent. It's kind of all the same things that you would have uploaded to EFS Web, plus a postcard, plus a certificate of mailing. One of our people says, do we need a separate certificate of mailing for each item in the package? Well, if they all relate to the same application number, one certificate of mailing will cover everything that's in that envelope. That's one of the things I like about Form SB 92. Some practitioners will, out of an abundance of caution, they'll use their rubber stamp certificate of mailing on each individual document that goes in. So they get to the claims, they put a certificate of mailing on the claims. They get to the amendment of the spec, they put a certificate of mailing on that. But the rule says that it's good enough if the certificate of mailing happens once in your package for a particular patent application. Okay. If you're going to use Click and Ship to prepare your, it says here Priority Mail Express. I really mean just ordinary Priority Mail, not Express. But I like to use Click and Ship because then you get tracking at no extra cost. Plan ahead. You can store your credit card in their system. You can store the mailing address for the post office in the address book of that system. You could use ordinary stamps. People do it. The drawback to that is it won't let you track the package. So I prefer Click and Ship because you get a tracking number. But you can use ordinary stamps if you want. Where do you ship it? Well, you ship it to this address, this P.O. box. Don't ship it anywhere else. This is the exact right place to send it. What will be the consequences if a person forgets the certificate of transmission? That's an extremely good question. The consequences will be that the patent office will give you credit for the day they receive it from the Postal Service instead of giving you credit for the day you dropped it in the mailbox. So if you were filing on the last possible day to respond to an office action, and if you forgot your certificate of transmission, then your filing will be untimely and you'll have to do a petition to revive to get your case revived. So the consequences of screwing up the certificate of transmission are that the patent office will only give you credit for the day that it actually physically arrived at the patent office. Okay. The shipping label. As I say, if you use their Priority Mail flat rate envelope, you can just pay the flat rate amount, $4.65. Otherwise, you're going to have to weigh the package to make sure that you pay enough postage, and your envelope will almost certainly be a so-called non-machinable oversized envelope, meaning that you'll have to pay more postage than you would think. More postage than just what you get by counting how many ounces it is. You'll have to pay for the fact that the envelope is oversized and perhaps that it's non-machinable. You got to make sure you pay enough money because otherwise it's going to be returned to sender and then your case is going to go abandoned. If you're going to use Click and Ship, you're going to print the label on your printer. and then there are 3 ways to apply that to your envelope. The way that we use in our office, we have label paper that you can buy that just has, it's 8.5 inches by 11. It has 2 gigantic labels on it. Each one is half of the page. You print the label, peel off the top half, that's your label, and stick it onto your envelope, and we like that. That's very convenient. One member of the EFS listserv reminds us that he likes to use a spray adhesive. He sprays the adhesive on the back of the shipping label and sticks it on the envelope, and that is a workable option. And finally, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You could just use Scotch tape and tape it onto your envelope, but that's obviously not as good. Let's talk a minute about the return postcard. The rules do not require you to provide a return postcard. You're not required to do it, but it's smart to do it. Very smart. And we'll talk about it now. What do you do with the postcard? Well, you buy a postcard at the post office. That's what I recommend. Or you can construct your own postcard by taking thick cardstock, cut it with scissors until it's 4 inches by 6 or smaller. In that case, you got to make sure there's enough postage on the card. Use a forever stamp. There are special forever stamps for postcards that cost 32 cents instead of 52 cents. And use a forever stamp. What you don't want to do is put on a stamp that is for so many cents, because likely as not, it'll turn out the rates went up and you won't have put the right number of stamps on the return postcard. Common sense perhaps would tell you, but common sense doesn't always work. You got to put a mailing address on the postcard. The folks at the patent office tell me that about 5% of the time they look at the return postcard and there's no mailing address on it, which means it won't do any good to drop it in the mail. Make sure there's a mailing address on the return postcard. And then you're going to list on the postcard itself everything that's going in the envelope, the response to the office action, the claims, the check number. You might list that you put in Form 2038 to authorize charging the credit card for the relevant fees or whatever, and perhaps a transmittal letter detailing what's in the envelope. The transmittal letter is not required. I would also include the Form SB 92. S signatures generally. One of our people asked about S signatures, the virgule signatures, slash signatures. Read Rule 4, 37 CFR 1.4. Read it carefully. It details when you can get away with a slash signature. Yes, you can use slash signatures on things that you put on paper and put in an envelope and mail to the patent office, but you got to make sure you are compliant with Rule 4. If there's anything handwritten on the same sheet with the signature, then a slash signature is defective and it has to be a wet signature. What are the consequences if you did an incorrect kind of signature? Well, the consequences could be pretty horrible. If, for example, you handed in an application data sheet and they decide the signature was defective, well, then it isn't an application data sheet anymore, and it will be treated as a mere transmittal letter and will not be given legal effect. One person asks, if I'm going to pay on paper and I'm going to pay with deposit account, how do I do it? The answer is you have a couple choices. If you use a USPTO transmittal, there's a way that you can authorize charging your deposit account. You can just construct something in your word processor that authorizes charging your deposit account. Okay, so the postcard. So you're going to complete the postcard, and that's going to be one of the things that goes into the envelope. Very important is the page count. Make sure that you show how many pages of claims there were, how many pages of amendments to the spec, so that later if the patent office says they can't find one of the pages of your claims or whatever, you can hand in that missing page, and it's not like you were adding new matter. Your response will have been complete even if they lost one of the pages. Somebody asks, if the office action response provides the page counts, is that good enough? Well, if it's in the office action response to authorize charging the deposit account, you mean, yes, that would be good enough. Yeah, if your office action response authorize charging the deposit account, that will be sufficient. Okay, so you're going to assemble your package. What's going to go in the package? Well, the return postcard, Form SB 92 or its equivalent, fully compliant with 37 CFR 1.8, perhaps a check or a Form 2038 to pay the fees if that's how you plan to pay your fees. And then everything that you would have uploaded to EFS Web needs to go into this package. Remarks, claims, new drawings, cover letter, whatever you were going to do in terms of uploading stuff to EFS Web, everything is going to have to be printed and included in this package that's going to go into this envelope. Obviously, shortly before you seal the envelope, you're going to want to make a nice photocopy or a scan of the contents so you have your own clear record of exactly what you stuck into the envelope in case questions come up later. Cross-checking. I recommend having a second pair of eyes do the cross-check to make sure the page counts match, that everything's in there that you intended to be in there, make sure the postcard is there, seal it up. Then you're going to drop this thing into a Dropbox, maybe go to the post office. Eventually, it'll get scanned into the post office system, and when it does, then use the tracking number on the U.S. Postal Service website to track it. And you'll find that in the tracking web page at the post office, at the USPS website, you fill in two fields, and one is the email address that they send their notifications to, and the other is where they want you to put in your name. Well, I don't think you should put your name in there. Put in the docket number for the file so that later when the emails show up, you can very quickly realize which of your files that email relates to. Docketing. I would certainly docket this at least as aggressively as you docket anything that you file in EFS Web. I would docket maybe a week to check for the return postcard showing up. I would docket maybe a week to check for the filing being visible in private pair. But in any event, I would dock this at least as much as you would have before. Let's talk now about what you would do if you're responding by fax instead of by postal service. Of course, fax in some ways is more convenient because you can do it and it's done and you don't have to think about it anymore. With postal service, you have to worry, what if I didn't put the right stamps on the envelope or something? With faxing, you're going to fax it to the central fax number, this fax number right here. Common sense tells you there's no purpose of providing a return postcard, so don't worry about that. Do absolutely include Form SB92 or its equivalent. And stand there and watch and make sure all the pages go through. Make sure you don't have two pages that stick together in the scanner going through the system. In our office, we do not do it with a physical fax machine unless there's no other choice. We do it by uploading it to a system that sends the fax in an electronic fashion. There are a couple ways that you could do that, and in our case, we can do it through our PBX, our telephone switch. We upload it to the telephone switch, and it then sends the fax in a purely electronic way. We also have a fax service provider, a fax vendor, and we upload it to their website, and they send the fax for us. And what goes into the fax? Well, everything that you would have uploaded into EFS Web, plus the Form SB92 or its equivalent, plus whatever it's going to take to pay the necessary fees, like Form 2038 for credit cards, or an authorization to charge your deposit account. That's for responding by fax. So who should sign the Form SB92? Should it be the patent attorney agent or should it be the staff member mailing the document? That's a very good question. And the answer is that whoever signs the certificate of faxing or the certificate of first-class mail, whoever signs it should be someone with personal knowledge of what's happening. So the person who personally is going to take it to the post office and drop it in the box, that's the right person to sign that certificate, to sign Form SB92. Or the person who's going to upload it to your fax sending system, that person should sign the SB92 or other certificate of facsimile transmission. One of our attendees says some of the fax services won't successfully transmit it on the first try, and they'll go into sort of a retry mode and maybe not try again until an hour later. And if you're close to midnight, you may not get it in on time, and this person is absolutely right, which is why if you're close to the deadline, I would actually just put it in an envelope and drop it in a Dropbox before midnight, because then you know it's in the mailbox, you know it's in the Dropbox. If you're going to rely on faxing it, you need to be in a position of knowing for sure that the fax will completely get through the last page transmitted chronologically before midnight. So thank you to that attendee who mentions it. Form SB92, is this the certificate of transmission? I faxed something yesterday and it shows SB97. I actually don't know about Form SB97, but if it's compliant with 37 CFR 1.8, then that's good enough. again, print out Rule 8, 37 CFR 1.8, and compare it with whatever form you're going to use. This SB 92 that I'm not familiar with, or SB 97 I'm not familiar with, or SB 92. Make sure it's compliant with Rule 8. That's the important part here. Okay. So we have now been through our material. We can get a few more questions from people. Do we have a disaster plan for EFS outage when we cannot access our electronic files? Yeah, our disaster relief plan is every time we filed something in the patent office, we emailed it to the client, and we have copies of all of the outgoing emails, including the attachments there too. And I've had plenty of cases where I have to go look at an outbound client email to see a copy of what we filed in the patent office if PAIR is broken. Yeah. We also try to download and save copies of everything that we file in the patent office, but sometimes the outgoing email is the only place I can find it. Issue fee transmittal form certificate of mailing to a different fax number. Somebody says that goes to fax number 2732885. Okay, I didn't know that. I would use the central fax number if I were paying an issue fee by fax. But anyway, apparently there's a different fax number. I faxed something yesterday, and my fax service sent 2 copies. Any ideas on what this effect will have? 2 payment forms, 2 everything. Well, I think it'll go into IFW twice, and it will go into the workflow twice, and you'll probably get charged twice, and you'll probably have to ask for a refund of the duplicate charges. That's probably what's going to happen. Okay, somebody explains that Form SB 97 is an old form labeled Certificate of Transmission under 37 CFR 1.8. Thank you. SB 97 was deleted, somebody says, as of July 2016, and it was the pre-AIA equivalent to the modern-day Form SB 92, says one of our nice attendees. Thank you for that information. With that, we have covered our material that we were hoping to cover. Please ask more questions in the next minute or two, but for the moment, I will just remind you of the live in-person Patent Cooperation Treaty Seminar that's going to take place in October in Redwood City, California. Please attend. Please tell your friends to attend. Please forward this information to all your friends at all the other law firms in the United States. I'd like to fill that room so that we get a full classroom. Several people have written to say thank you, and to that I will say you are very welcome. Again, if you're going to put in a CLE credit, please go to this webpage and tell us that you did it, because we are obligated to keep records of all the people who claim CLE. You will have to ask for the credit from your own CLE agency. We are not going to be getting your credit for you. And again, 23 hours from now, you're going to receive a follow-up email that includes an evaluation questionnaire. Please fill out the evaluation questionnaire for at least 2 reasons. Number 1, we are required to get evaluation questionnaires collected from everybody as a condition of our CLE accreditation. And second, you will be benefiting future people who might be attending programs like this. Your comments will help us give better webinars in the future. If you liked anything about this webinar, it's basically because in the past people handed in evaluation questionnaires and made comments that helped this program be possible. One person says, could we please slowly page through the slideshow again? I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to go back to page 1 of the slideshow, and I will just kind of go through it slide by slide. But again, please understand, in about 23 hours, you're going to get a follow-up email with a link to where you can obtain a copy of these presentation slides. Oh, actually, I'm looking at the time. I'm just not going to have time to go through the slideshow again today. But you'll receive an email tomorrow with a link that explains, that shows where to download all of these slides. And with that, I will say thank you very much, and we are done.